The crisp October air sweeping across Oakbridge Academy's immaculate lawns meant nothing to Marcus Vance. At 17, he was already suffocating in a life where everything was given and nothing was earned. He pulled his Audi into a faculty parking spot, the engine's quiet growl a familiar sound of defiance. Students, clad in expensive, logo-free sweaters, averted their eyes. They knew who he was. They knew he didn't care. He walked through the sterile marble hallways of the Philadelphia Academy, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He passed the gallery of polished portraits, decades of powerful alumni, senators, CEOs, and judges, staring down with identical, severe expressions. Marcus didn't know that the most powerful mind on campus wasn't framed on that wall. She was just ahead, pushing a gray custodial cart, her movements methodical and quiet. Mrs. Clara Hayes, a black woman in her 60s, moved with a quiet dignity, invisible to the tidal wave of privileged youth that flowed around her every day. Marcus's first stop was predictable: Vice Principal Allen's office. Allen, a man whose spine seemed permanently molded to his chair, gestured weakly at Marcus's file. "Marcus," he began, "your literature grade is concerning. And math. And history. Your father won't be pleased." Marcus leaned back, the picture of boredom. "My father's donations pay your salary, Mr. Allen. I think we're done here." He stood up without being dismissed. As he pushed the door open, he carelessly bumped into Mrs. Hayes, who was wiping down the doorframe. "Watch it," he muttered, not even making eye contact as she stabilized her cart. She said nothing, simply watched him go. The chill of the school was matched by the frost at home. The Vance mansion was vast, modern, and empty, a showcase of cold glass and steel. Dinner was a tense, silent affair until Harrison Vance, a self-made tech billionaire who saw emotion as a rounding error, finally spoke. He slid a file across the polished mahogany table. "You're an embarrassment," Harrison said, his voice flat, not even angry. "Just disappointed." Allen called. "Failing. Not just one class, all of them." He looked at his son. "If you worked for me, you'd be fired." "I'm not your employee," Marcus shot back. "No. You're a liability." Harrison leaned forward. "This stops. No more car. No more credit cards. You will fix this, or you will find out what nothing really means." Marcus storms out, ignoring his father, and drives off, feeling the weight of the ultimatum. He knows he's failing, but he has absolutely no idea how to stop. We pause here at the end of our first chapter, with Marcus feeling the weight of his father's ultimatum, lost and completely unsure how to stop the cycle of failure. If you are still watching and find this story valuable, please comment with the number 8 below, just to let me know you are here on this journey with us. And if you haven't subscribed to Black King yet, I truly recommend you do, and please turn on that notification bell. You won't want to miss the moment this story transforms. Your support is what helps us continue to create powerful content meant to inspire and uplift you. Now, let's continue. The next week, the threats became reality. Harrison took the car and cut the cards, forcing Marcus to take the school bus, where his failure suddenly felt very public. The shame of the cold vinyl seat was worse than his father's yelling. He slouched low, hood pulled up, ignoring the curious stares. He began arriving at school long before the first bell, just to avoid the crowds, entering through a side door. He found the hallways weren't empty. Mrs. Hayes was always there, moving with a slow, steady rhythm, her mop bucket squeaking softly in the quiet. The weather turned gray and rainy, mirroring the atmosphere inside Oakbridge as midterm grades were finalized. In his literature class, the teacher dropped a paper on his desk without comment. A large 18/100 was circled in red ink. Below it, a handwritten note. "Did you even read the passage?" Later, in the cafeteria, he sat alone. Brent, a popular loud classmate whose wealth nearly matched Marcus's, walked by with his group. "Hey, Vance," Brent called out. "I heard they're making you ride the loser cruiser. Guess money can't buy a GPA, huh?" Marcus just stared at his uneaten lunch. A few mornings later, defeated, Marcus slumped against the wall in a forgotten hallway, trying to force his eyes to focus on a textbook. He overheard Mrs. Hayes, who was buffing the floor nearby, whispering something to herself. It was almost a hum. "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." Marcus lifted his head. What did you say? She paused the buffer and looked at him, her eyes clear and unafraid. Socrates, she replied simply. You're quoting Socrates? Marcus asked, a flicker of disbelief in his voice. Mrs. Hayes rested her hands on the machine's handle. She observed him for a long moment, taking in the expensive shoes, the exhausted eyes, and the failing grade clutched in his hand. It's weirder, she said, her voice calm and even, when a boy with the whole world at his feet can't pass a simple reading test. It wasn't an insult. It was a fact, and it struck Marcus with more force than Brent's mockery or his father's rage. She turned the buffer back on and moved down the hall, leaving him in silence. That afternoon, having received yet another failure notice, a 0 in biology, Marcus finds Mrs. Hayes packing her cart by the service exit. His heart pounded. He swallowed his pride, the hardest thing he'd ever done. Teach me, he whispered, please. I can't keep failing. The next morning, Marcus arrived before sunrise, the massive school silent and dark, clutching a notebook like it was a lifeline. He found Mrs. Hayes not in the hallway, but waiting for him by the entrance to the old, unused wing of the library. Dust motes danced in the single beam of her flashlight. I said I'd teach you, she reminded him, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. I also said it wouldn't be easy. She motioned to a small, wooden table. One condition, you leave your name and your pride at that door. We start from 0. Marcus sat, the cheap notebook feeling foreign in his hands. Why are you doing this? And how do you know all this stuff? Mrs. Clara Hayes pulled up a chair, her movements deliberate. She looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time, Marcus saw the professor beneath the uniform. My name is Clara Hayes. And for 20 years before this, she gestured to her janitorial keys, I was a tenured professor of English literature and philosophy at the University of Chicago. Marcus was stunned into silence. What happened? She exhaled slowly, a story of profound injustice held in that single breath. I blew the whistle on a plagiarism scandal involving a powerful dean, she explained, her voice devoid of self-pity. I refused the hush money. They blacklisted me. Quietly, systematically. She tapped the table. They took my office, they took my title. But they couldn't take my mind. She pushed his pristine, empty notebook back toward him. We don't start with your textbook. That's just memorization. We start with honesty. She pulled a small, battered book of poetry from her own bag, Langston Hughes. She opened it to a page. Read this. Aloud. Marcus stumbled over the words. Again, she said patiently. He read it again. Now, Mrs. Hayes said, don't tell me what it means. Tell me what it made you feel. Marcus stared at the page. I don't know. It's just words. That's pride talking, she said gently. Pride fools you into thinking you already know. Try again. Write one true sentence about what you felt. Marcus spends hours that night rewriting a single paragraph, frustrated but engaged for the first time in his life. He finally understands. Mrs. Hayes isn't teaching him how to pass a test, she's teaching him how to think. Marcus is finally learning the secret, not how to pass, but how to think. A true transformation has begun. If you are still watching this video and find this powerful moment in his journey valuable, please comment with the number 8 below to let me know you are here with us. And if you haven't subscribed to Black King yet, I truly recommend you do, and please turn on that notification bell. You won't want to miss the confrontation that's coming. Your support helps us continue to create great content to inspire you. Now, let's continue. By mid-November, Marcus wasn't just passing, he was engaging, writing essays on philosophy and justice, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of pride, a pride that had nothing to do with the name Vance. The lessons in the dusty library corner had become his anchor, a quiet space of truth in a world built on appearances. But that transformation, built in the shadows of the school, was about to collide violently with the cold reality of his father's world. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Marcus and Mrs. Hayes were deep in discussion over an essay he'd written. The quiet of the old library was suddenly broken by the sharp click of expensive shoes on the hardwood floor. Harrison Vance stood at the end of the aisle, his tailored suit immaculate, his face a mask of controlled fury. He had clearly, finally, tracked his son down. He observed them for a long, terrible moment. His son, heir to a billion-dollar tech empire, sitting at a wobbly table with a black woman in a blue janitorial uniform. He watched as Mrs. Hayes pointed to a line in Marcus's paper, and Marcus nodded, listening intently. Marcus, Harrison's voice was low, slicing through the quiet. What is this? Marcus stood up, startled. Dad. I'm studying. Harrison's eyes flickered to Mrs. Hayes with undisguised contempt. You're learning from her? He didn't wait for an answer, turning his full, venomous attention to Mrs. Hayes. You're a janitor. A failure. You have no right to interfere with my son. Whatever you think you're doing, it's over. Mrs. Hayes slowly rose from her chair, her back straight, her dignity untouched. She did not speak. Stop it, Marcus said, his voice shaking. I am handling this, Harrison snapped. No. Marcus stepped slightly in front of Mrs. Hayes. She's done more for me than you ever have. She was a professor at the University of Chicago. She's the only one who taught me how to think. Harrison stared at his son as if he were a stranger, a defective product. I don't care what she was. I care what she is. He pointed a finger at Marcus. If you do not stop this embarrassment, you lose everything. The money, the name. You're out. Choose. The air crackled. Marcus looked at his father's cold, demanding face. Then he looked at Mrs. Hayes, who was watching him, not with fear, but with sad, proud eyes. He made the choice. Then I lose it, Marcus said, his voice trembling but firm. I won't quit on her. Harrison Vance looks at his son with cold finality. Pack your things. You're done. He turns and leaves the library, the silence deafening. The next day, Marcus arrived at school to find Mrs. Hayes was gone. Her locker was empty, her cart nowhere to be seen. He was officially locked out of his home, and now, his only mentor had vanished. Harrison Vance had kept his word. Marcus found Vice Principal Allen in the hall, who refused to meet his eyes. Mrs. Hayes? Marcus asked. Miss Hayes's position was terminated, Allen said stiffly. Budget restructuring. Marcus knew it was a lie. He walked the halls like a ghost for the rest of the week, the fire inside him extinguished. He had lost everything. Then his eyes caught a flyer on the main bulletin board. End-of-year speech contest. Topic: what it means to win in life. A new, cold fire began to burn. He spent all night writing, not for a grade, not for a prize, but for her. He poured everything she had taught him, about truth, about honesty, about transformation, onto the blank pages. The night of the contest, the Oakbridge Academy auditorium was packed. Wealthy parents, impatient faculty, and nervous students filled every seat. Harrison Vance sat in the front row, his face rigid, expecting a final public humiliation from his son. Vice Principal Allen sat nearby. Unseen by them, Mrs. Clara Hayes, wearing a simple wool coat, slipped quietly into the very last row, just to see him speak one last time. Marcus Vance. Marcus walked on stage, not in the expected suit, but in the simple, clean clothes he'd been wearing all week. He gripped the podium. My name is Marcus Vance, he began, his voice quiet but clear. And I have failed every test this school has ever put in front of me. A confused murmur rippled through the audience. They say I had everything. But I was empty. I was arrogant, and I was failing, until I met Mrs. Clara Hayes. He heard gasps. She wasn't paid to help me, he continued. She wasn't my teacher. She wasn't a tutor. She was the school janitor. He saw his father go pale. She taught me the one secret this school forgot, that learning isn't about grades. It's about transformation. She taught me how to read, how to think, and how to be human. What the school and my father didn't know is that Mrs. Hayes was a tenured professor of philosophy. The auditorium was deathly quiet. Marcus looked directly at his father, then at Vice Principal Allen. She taught me how to think, and for that, this school, this system, fired her. He held up his worn notebook. Real winning isn't about power or money. It's about becoming someone worth remembering. She is Mrs. Clara Hayes, and she saved my soul. The auditorium is in stunned silence. Then from the back, one person starts clapping, slowly, rhythmically. It's Mrs. Hayes, tears streaming down her face. The room explodes into a standing ovation. The video of Marcus's speech, filmed by a classmate, didn't just spread through the school. It hit the Philadelphia News by morning. The headline was immediate. Billionaire's son credits fired black janitor for saving his soul. The system that had tried to silence Mrs. Hayes had inadvertently given her the biggest microphone of her life. Job offers from universities and speaking engagements flooded in for her. Oakbridge Academy, facing an avalanche of bad press, issued a public apology. Marcus, meanwhile, declined his acceptance to Yale. He found Mrs. Hayes at her small apartment, helping her sort through letters. "What if we built a place," he proposed, "not like Oakbridge, but a place for everyone else who was written off?" The most unexpected visitor arrived a week later. Harrison Vance stood at Mrs. Hayes's door, looking older and smaller. He had watched the video. I didn't expect to cry," Harrison admitted quietly to his son, who was also there. He then turned to Mrs. Hayes, his voice thick with a shame he had never known. He apologized. And then he offered to fund their idea, no strings attached. Months later, the Hayes Institute for Lifelong Learning opened its doors in a repurposed community center in the heart of the city. It was warm, filled with mismatched chairs, donated books, and the smell of fresh coffee. Mrs. Hayes, standing at a chalkboard, was teaching a packed room of adults and teens, her voice ringing with the passion she had held back for so long. In a corner, Marcus was helping a young student, whispering the same question that had saved him. "But what did it make you feel?" Harrison Vance stood in the back, watching his son, not the heir, but the man, and for the first time he smiled, not with pride, but with peace. Greatness, Marcus realized, didn't come from being seen. It came from seeing others. And sometimes the person who teaches you the most isn't in a suit, but is holding a mop, quoting philosophers while no one is listening. In the quiet halls of a school built on judgment, a single act of seeing someone for who they truly were, not what they appeared to be, saved 2 souls at once. When we choose to look past the uniform, the color, or the title, we often find the greatest wisdom in the most unexpected places. If this story of transformation resonated with your heart, please share your thoughts or a similar experience in the comments below. For more powerful journeys that give voice to the unseen, remember to subscribe to the Black King channel, where every story matters.